I was sitting in my kitchen, still wearing my black funeral dress, when the phone rang. "Mrs. Morgan?" The funeral director's voice was shaking. "We have a serious problem. Your husband, he's asking for his wallet." I nearly dropped the phone. "That's impossible," I whispered. "I just buried Andre 3 hours ago." But then I heard a familiar voice in the background and my blood ran cold. "Thanks for being here. Hit like, subscribe, and tell me in the comments where this story found you. Let me take you back to the beginning of this nightmare. My name is Danielle Morgan, and until 3 days ago, I thought I was living a perfect life. Andre and I had been married for 35 years. He was everything a woman could want in a husband. Successful, charming, attentive, and still handsome at 58 with those salt and pepper temples that made other women turn their heads when we walked into a room together. We lived in a beautiful colonial house in Westchester County, the kind with white picket fences and rose gardens that you see in magazines. Andre worked as a senior financial advisor at Morrison & Associates, one of the most prestigious firms in Manhattan. He made good money, enough that I could pursue my passion for interior design without worrying about paying bills. We had everything we'd ever dreamed of, except children. But after years of trying and multiple heartbreaking miscarriages, we'd made peace with being just the two of us. Or so I thought. 3 days before that phone call, Andre had what the doctors called a massive heart attack while he was jogging in Central Park. A jogger found him collapsed on the path near the reservoir, his face blue, no pulse. The paramedics worked on him for 45 minutes, but it was too late. My husband of 35 years was gone, just like that. No warning, no goodbye, no chance to tell him all the things you never think to say until it's too late. The funeral was everything Andre would have wanted. I spared no expense. The church was filled with white lilies, his favorite flowers. His colleagues from Morrison & Associates gave beautiful speeches about his integrity and dedication. His old college friends flew in from across the country. Even the mayor sent a representative because Andre had done so much charity work for the city. I wore the black Chanel dress he'd bought me for our 30th anniversary. The one he said made me look like a movie star. My hair was perfectly styled, my makeup flawless despite the tears. I wanted to honor him properly, to show everyone how much I loved the man who'd been my everything for more than half my life. The place of service was St. Michael's Cathedral, where we got married many years back. I was in the front pew receiving condolences in a manner Andre always found admirable in me. Everyone said how sorry they were that Andre was a good man and how they couldn't believe he was dead. I nodded at them and thanked them. I am playing the grieving widow, so of course I was. After the burial at Greenwood Cemetery, I came home to an empty house. The silence was deafening. No, Andre calling out, "Honey, I'm home," when he walked through the door. No sound of his shoes on the hardwood floor. While working on client portfolios, no jazzy music blared from his study. There was nothing but silence and the strong scent of flowers for funerals. I was sitting at our kitchen table, still in my funeral dress, because I couldn't bear to take it off yet. It felt like removing it would make his death even more real, more final. I was staring at the sympathy cards people had given me, dozens of them, when the phone rang. I almost didn't answer. I wasn't ready to talk to anyone, wasn't ready for more condolences or offers to bring me casseroles I'd never eat. But something made me pick up the phone. Maybe it was habit. Andre always said I was too polite for my own good. "Hello? Mrs. Morgan?" The voice was nervous, shaky. I recognized it immediately. Walter Stevens, the funeral director from Stevens & Sons Funeral Home. We'd spent hours together over the past 3 days, planning every detail of Andre's service. "Yes, Mr. Stevens, is everything all right?" There was a long pause. So long I thought the call had dropped. Then his voice came back, barely above a whisper. "Mrs. Morgan, we have a serious problem. Your husband, he's asking for his wallet." The words didn't make sense. I must have misheard. "I'm sorry, what did you say?" "Your husband, ma'am. He's here at the funeral home and he's asking for his wallet. He says he needs it for a flight tonight." The room started spinning. This wasn't possible. This couldn't be happening. "That's impossible," I whispered, my voice barely audible. "I just buried Andre 3 hours ago. That's when I heard it. In the background, muffled but unmistakable, a voice I knew better than my own, a voice that had whispered, "I love you," in my ear for 35 years, a voice that was supposed to be silent forever. "Where's my damn wallet, Walter? I told you I need it back." My blood ran cold. The phone slipped from my numb fingers and clattered onto the kitchen table. It was like I was possessed by something as I drove down to Stevens & Son's funeral home. I gripped the steering with my knuckles turning white. The travel of 20 minutes felt like years as I pondered the impossible. Maybe I was having a breakdown. Maybe grief had finally snapped my sanity. But deep in my gut, I knew what I'd heard was real. The funeral home looked different at night. The lights that had welcomed mourners just hours earlier were turned off, and the entire parking lot was plunged into darkness. Only Walter's old sedan remained in the staff parking area. I parked my car beside it and sat in my car for a moment to prepare myself for what I was about to find out. Walter Stevens met me at the side entrance, his face pale and drawn. He'd changed out of his formal funeral director's suit into jeans and a wrinkled shirt, like he'd been caught off guard by whatever was happening inside his own building. "Mrs. Morgan," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I'm so sorry. I never wanted you to find out this way." "Find out what?" I demanded, though part of me already knew the answer would destroy what was left of my world. Walter couldn't meet my eyes. "He's in the preparation room. He's been there for the past hour, demanding his personal effects back. He paid me $50,000, Mrs. Morgan, cash. Said it was for my retirement fund if I helped him with this arrangement." $50,000. The number hit me like a physical blow. Where had Andre gotten that kind of cash? We shared all our accounts, reviewed our finances together every month. How had he hidden $50,000 from me? "Show me," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. Walter led me through the maze of hallways I'd walked just hours earlier while planning Andre's service. But now everything felt sinister, like I was seeing it all for the first time. We stopped outside the preparation room, and Walter hesitated. "Mrs. Morgan, are you sure you're ready for this?" I didn't answer. I pushed past him and opened the door. Andre was sitting on the preparation table, very much alive, counting a stack of bills. He looked up when I entered, and for a split second I saw genuine surprise cross his face. Then it was replaced by something I'd never seen before, cold calculation. "Danielle." He said my name like it was a minor inconvenience. "You weren't supposed to be here." I stared at my husband, the man I'd grieved for 3 days, the man whose eulogy had brought me to tears just hours earlier. He looked exactly the same, except for one thing. There was no warmth in his eyes when he looked at me. No love, no regret, no explanation, just annoyance that his plan had been interrupted. "You're alive," I whispered, stating the obvious because my brain couldn't process anything more complex. "Obviously." Andre hopped down from the table and straightened his clothes. He was wearing the navy suit I'd bought him for our anniversary last year. "Walter, where's my wallet? And my passport? I have a flight to catch." "Andre," I said, my voice growing stronger. "What is this? What's happening? I buried you today. I gave a speech at your funeral. I threw dirt on your coffin." He finally looked at me directly, and what I saw in his eyes made my knees weak. There was no recognition of our 35 years together, no acknowledgement of what this was doing to me. He looked at me like I was a stranger, or worse, like I was an obstacle. "The coffin was weighted," he said matter-of-factly. "Sandbags. Walter's idea, actually. Quite clever." I turned to Walter, who was standing in the doorway looking like he wanted to disappear. "You helped him fake his own death?" "Mrs. Morgan, he said it was for insurance purposes, that you knew about it. He said you were having financial troubles, and this was the only way to save your house." Insurance. The word clicked something into place in my mind. Andre suggested us to update our life and medical insurance policies 6 months ago. He had mentioned that it was valid financial planning that would ensure protection for both of us. I had complete faith in him, so I signed whatever he asked me to. "How much?" I asked Andre directly. "How much is my grief worth to you?" For the first time, he smiled. It wasn't the warm smile I'd fallen in love with 36 years ago. It was cold, predatory. 2.3 million, he said. More than enough for Lena and me to start fresh somewhere warm. Lena. The name hit me like a sledgehammer. Lena Zhao, his secretary. The quiet, efficient woman who'd worked for him for the past 2 years. The woman who'd sent me a beautiful sympathy card just yesterday, expressing her sorrow at losing such a wonderful boss. Your secretary, ma'am, I said, the pieces falling into place. She's part of this. She's my partner, Andre corrected, in every sense of the word. Has been for 18 months now. 18 months. While I was planning our 35th anniversary celebration, he was planning our lives' destruction. While I was picking out gifts to show him how much I loved him, he was figuring out how to steal my future. The heart attack, I said. How did you fake that? Tetrodotoxin, Andre said proudly, like he was explaining a successful business deal. Small dose. Slows the heart rate to almost nothing. Mimics death for several hours. Lena's idea. She's quite brilliant, actually. I looked at this man I'd shared my bed with for 35 years, whose coffee I'd made every morning, whose shirts I'd pressed, whose dreams I'd supported, and I realized I'd never known him at all. Walter cleared his throat nervously. Mrs. Morgan, I think you should know. The life insurance investigators called this afternoon. They want to meet tomorrow to discuss the claim. Andre's confident expression faltered for just a moment. Then he shrugged. Doesn't matter, he said. By tomorrow, Lena and I will be in a country that doesn't have extradition treaties with the United States. He reached for his wallet on the counter, and that's when I saw it. Our wedding ring was gone from his finger. 35 years of marriage, erased like it had never happened. Something inside me snapped, not broke, snapped, like a rubber band that had been stretched too far and suddenly recoiled with devastating force. Walter, I said, my voice deadly calm. I think it's time we called the police. By the time the police arrived at Stevens & Sons' funeral home, Andre was gone. Walter claimed he'd slipped out the back door while I was calling 911, but I suspected Walter had warned him. $50,000 in cash buys a lot of loyalty, apparently. Detective Sarah Martinez took my statement with professional sympathy, but I could see the skepticism in her eyes. A dead man walking out of his own funeral home wasn't exactly standard police business. She promised to investigate, but I knew Andre had at least a 6-hour head start. By morning, he and Lena could be anywhere. I drove home in a daze, my mind reeling from everything I'd discovered. But as I pulled into my driveway, something Walter had said kept echoing in my head. The life insurance investigators wanted to meet tomorrow. That meant they hadn't paid out the claim yet. Andre's plan wasn't complete. Inside my house, I went straight to Andre's study. For 35 years, I didn't go into this room. It was his safe haven filled with client files and financial documents I never thought to query. I rummaged through cabinets, drawers, and file cabinets tonight trying to find something to help me. What I discovered made my blood boil. The first shock was the insurance policies themselves. Andre had taken out 3 life insurance policies in the last 8 months of his life. His company's group policy covered the largest one for a sum of $2 million. Before he departed, he bought a $300,000 personal policy from an independent agent. But the third one made my hands shake with rage. He'd forged my signature on a joint policy worth an additional $500,000, using me as the beneficiary on paper, but setting up automatic electronic transfer to an account I'd never seen before. If his plan had worked, I would have been unknowingly complicit in insurance fraud. I found the bank statements for this mystery account next. Andre had been siphoning money from our joint savings for months, small amounts at first, then larger withdrawals as his plans solidified. $20,000 here, $30,000 there, all labeled as business expenses or investment opportunities. The account balance showed over $200,000, money he'd stolen from our shared life to fund his escape with his mistress. But the most damaging evidence was in a manila folder hidden behind his college diplomas. Love letters, dozens of them, in Lena's handwriting going back 18 months, just like Andre had said. But these weren't just romantic notes. They were detailed plans for his fake death, complete with research on untraceable poisons, countries without extradition treaties, and new identity documentation. One letter in particular made me sick to my stomach. Lena had written, "My darling Andre, I can't wait until we're free of your pathetic wife and her boring suburban life. Once we collect the insurance money, we can finally live like the sophisticated people we are. I've already picked out our villa in Costa Rica. Poor Danielle will never know what hit her." Poor Danielle. Like I was some helpless victim who deserved to be destroyed for their convenience. I photographed every document, every letter, every bank statement. If Andre thought he could steal my life and disappear without consequences, he was about to learn how wrong he was. But I needed help, and I knew exactly who to call. My nephew, Caleb Turner, had been a detective with the NYPD for 12 years, specializing in financial crimes. More importantly, he was family. Real family, not the fake version Andre had been playing for months. I called Caleb at home, not caring that it was past midnight. "Aunt Danielle?" His voice was groggy, but immediately concerned. "What's wrong? Are you okay?" "Caleb, I need your help. Andre is alive and he's trying to steal over $2 million in life insurance money." There was a long pause. Then Caleb's voice came back, fully alert and all business. "I'm on my way. Don't touch anything else. Don't talk to anyone. And Aunt Danielle, if what you're telling me is true, Andre has committed multiple felonies. This isn't just about money anymore. This is about justice." Justice. The word felt like a lifeline in the darkness that had become my life. When I waited for Caleb, I poured myself a coffee and sat down in Andre's leather chair. The place was well fitted and littered with the evidence of his betrayal. For 35 years, I had been the supportive wife, the woman behind the man. I did all the planning for our social calendar, hosted his business dinners, and never questioned him because I totally trusted him. That trust had been my biggest mistake, but it wouldn't be my last. I opened my laptop and began typing. If Andre wanted to play games with insurance companies and fake deaths, he was about to discover that his pathetic wife was far more resourceful than he'd ever imagined. I'd spent 3 decades building relationships in this community, earning respect and trust from people who mattered. Andre thought he was so clever, using my grief against me, counting on my ignorance to cover his tracks. But he'd made one critical error in his calculations. He'd underestimated me. When Caleb arrived 30 minutes later, I had everything organized and ready. The insurance policies, the bank statements, the love letters, and most importantly, a detailed timeline showing exactly when Andre had started planning my destruction. "Aunt Danielle," Caleb said, looking at the evidence spread across the dining room table. "This is enough to put him away for 15 years minimum, but we need to move fast. If he's planning to leave the country, he won't get far," I interrupted, "because tomorrow morning I'm going to do something he'll never expect." "What's that?" I smiled for the first time in days, and it felt like steel in my mouth. "I'm going to give him exactly what he wants." The next morning, Caleb arrived with coffee and a plan. My nephew had always been sharp, but seeing him in full detective mode made me realize how lucky I was to have real family on my side. "First things first," he said, spreading out a city map on my kitchen table. "We need to find where Andre's been hiding. The bank statements show regular ATM withdrawals from the same location in Midtown. There's only one residential building in that radius expensive enough for someone planning to disappear with millions." Within 2 hours, we'd located Andre's secret apartment, a luxury high-rise on East 79th Street where doormen won't ask too many questions if you're paying enough for their discretion. Caleb had people who could give us surveillance access, but I had a better thought. "I'm going in as a potential renter," I told him. "Middle-aged woman looking for a pied-à-terre in the city. They'll never suspect." What I discovered in that building shattered the last illusions I had about my marriage. Andre wasn't just hiding an affair, he was living an entirely different life. The apartment reflected all the things I had thought we had: modern furniture instead of our traditional antiques, abstract art instead of family photos. There was some wine I'd never heard of in a fridge full of foods Andre said he hated. This wasn't a temporary hideout. This was the life he actually wanted, one that I'd apparently been keeping him from for 35 years. But the real shock came when I saw them together through the floor-to-ceiling windows. Andre and Lena weren't just lovers plotting a crime. They were completely comfortable, like they'd been playing house for months. She moved around the kitchen like she belonged there, wearing one of his shirts, making breakfast while he read the newspaper in silk pajamas I'd never seen before. They looked happy, genuinely, effortlessly happy, in a way that made my chest ache with a pain deeper than any betrayal. This wasn't just about money. Andre had built a whole new life and identity, one where I simply didn't exist. I watched them for 20 minutes from the building's observation deck, photographing everything with my phone. That's when I overheard the conversation that changed everything. The insurance investigator called, Lena was saying as she handed Andre a cup of coffee. He wants to meet with the widow tomorrow at 10. Perfect, Andre replied. By tomorrow afternoon, we'll be on a plane to San Jose. Did you transfer the money from the European account? All set. 2.8 million, just like we planned. Poor Danielle probably still thinks she's getting a widow's payout. They both laughed, and something cold and determined settled in my chest. I called Caleb immediately. I need you to meet me at the apartment and bring backup. What did you find? Everything, and they're planning to leave tomorrow afternoon. When Caleb arrived with Detective Martinez, I showed them the photos and played the audio I'd recorded on my phone. Caleb's expression grew darker with each piece of evidence. Aunt Danielle, this is bigger than insurance fraud, he said grimly. The ATM withdrawals, the overseas accounts, the systematic identity building. This fits a pattern we've been tracking for months. What pattern? There's a network of people helping wealthy individuals fake their deaths and disappear. We think Andre and Lena are part of a larger operation. The funeral director, Walter Stevens, his bank records show deposits from 4 other widows in the past year. Detective Martinez nodded. We've been investigating suspicious death claims, but we needed solid evidence. What you've given us could break this whole thing open. So what's the plan? I asked. Caleb smiled grimly. We're going to give Andre exactly what he wants. Tomorrow morning, you're going to that insurance meeting. You're going to play the grieving widow perfectly, and when Andre tries to collect his payout, we'll be waiting. What about tonight? Tonight, we watch and wait. Andre thinks he's won, thinks you're just a naive widow who'll never figure out what happened. Let him keep thinking that until it's too late. I looked back toward the building where my husband was playing house with his mistress, spending stolen money and planning his escape from the life we'd built together. He called me pathetic, I said quietly, said I was boring and suburban. Aunt Danielle, Caleb said with a fierce smile, by tomorrow night, Andre is going to learn that boring suburban women can be the most dangerous enemies of all. I was ready to show him exactly how dangerous. That evening, while Caleb coordinated with his team for tomorrow's operation, I was going through my phone when I discovered something that made my hands tremble. During Andre's funeral service, I'd recorded his eulogy on my phone, wanting to preserve the beautiful words his colleagues had said about him. But as I scrolled through my recordings, I found something I'd completely forgotten about. A 23-minute recording I'd accidentally started when I thought I was taking photos near the casket during the final viewing. My phone had been in my purse, but the microphone had picked up everything. I put in my earbuds and listened, my heart pounding as I heard my own voice saying goodbye to Andre, telling him how much I loved him, how lost I felt without him. But then, in the background, I heard something that made my blood freeze. Whispered voices near the casket. Andre's voice. So quiet I'd missed it entirely during the emotional chaos of the moment. Walter, the flowers are blocking the microphone. Move them. Mr. Morgan, please stay still. People are watching. The weight distribution feels off. Did you use enough sand? Sir, your wife is coming back. Please close your eyes. There it was. Undeniable proof that Andre had been conscious and directing his own funeral like a theater performance. I'd been grieving over an empty box while my husband whispered stage directions from inside it. I called Caleb immediately. I have something you need to hear. When he arrived, I played the recording. His face went white as he listened to Andre's casual voice orchestrating the deception while I sobbed over his casket just feet away. "This is perfect," Caleb said grimly. "This proves premeditation and intent to defraud." But Aunt Danielle, listening to this, must be devastating. He was right. When I heard my own broken voice bid farewell to a man who was very much alive, a man who was trying to steal my future while I mourned his death, I nearly broke down. But it also crystallized something inside me. This wasn't just about money anymore. This was about justice. The next morning, I carefully dressed for the insurance meeting. I wore a black dress, minimal makeup, and just the right amount of composure to look like a widow trying to be strong. Elliot Tran was the insurance investigator who met me in the Morrison & Associates conference room. Andre had worked there for 15 years. "Mrs. Morgan," Elliot said with professional sympathy, "I know this is difficult, but we need to review some details about your husband's policy before we can process the claim." I played my part perfectly, grieving widow, slightly overwhelmed by financial details, trusting the experts to handle everything properly. But Elliot was sharper than I'd expected. "Mrs. Morgan, I notice your husband increased his life insurance coverage significantly in the past 8 months. Can you tell me what prompted those changes?" Andre said it was just responsible planning, I replied truthfully. He wanted to make sure I was protected. "And you weren't involved in those decisions?" "I trusted my husband completely with our finances. That was probably naive of me." Elliot made notes, his expression carefully neutral. "Mrs. Morgan, I need to ask you some difficult questions. Did your husband seem depressed or stressed in the weeks before his death?" This was where my performance mattered most. "Actually, yes. He'd been working late more often, seemed distracted. I thought it was just work pressure, but looking back..." I let my voice trail off meaningfully. "Did he mention any financial problems?" "Not directly, but I found some credit card statements after he died. It looks like we had more debt than I realized." This was true. The debt Andre had hidden from me to fund his secret life. Elliot's interest sharpened. What kind of debt? Cash advances, personal loans. I think Andre might have been gambling or making bad investments. I'm still trying to understand our financial situation. What Elliot didn't know was that Caleb and his team were positioned throughout the building. They'd tapped the conference room, and more importantly, they were monitoring every communication going in and out of the building. "Mrs. Morgan, we'll need to conduct a more thorough investigation before approving the claim. This may take several weeks." "I understand," I said, allowing a note of worry to creep into my voice. "I just hope there aren't any problems. I don't know how I'll manage financially without Andre." The meeting lasted 2 hours. Although Elliot asked all the right questions about Andre's health, our relationship, and the circumstances of his death, it never struck me as suspicious. I'm honest about everything with the authorities, except the fact that Andre is alive. In fact, my answers supported the story of a man under financial pressure who could resort to extreme measures. As I left the building, I called Caleb from my car. "How did it go?" he asked. "Perfect. Elliot thinks Andre might have killed himself for the insurance money. The debt I found supports that theory." "And Andre?" "According to our surveillance, he's been monitoring the insurance company's communications. He knows the meeting happened. He'll be getting ready to make his move. Then we'll be ready for him." I drove home with the funeral recording still echoing in my mind. Andre's whispered voice directing his own death scene while I cried real tears over his empty casket. The casual cruelty of it, the complete disregard for my pain, had transformed my grief into something much more dangerous. By tonight, Andre would discover that his boring, pathetic wife had learned how to play the game better than he ever imagined. The trap was set for 6 o'clock that evening. Andre had an appointment to meet with a corrupt insurance adjuster who was willing to facilitate the payment of a hefty bribe. Little did he know that the adjuster was actually Detective Martinez, and the meeting room in the downtown hotel was surrounded by federal agents. Caleb and I sat inside an unmarked van as Andre made his entrance. He strolled in wearing a new suit, looking confident and relaxed. He even got a haircut related to this and held a leather briefcase with fake ID documents. Lena was waiting in a taxi outside for a fast-paced getaway to the airport. "Target is entering the building," Caleb spoke into his radio. "All units maintain positions." Looking through the surveillance equipment system, we see Andre shaking hands with Detective Martinez. He is completely confident that he is going to take home his stolen fortune. He opened his briefcase and laid out documents including his fake death certificate, forged medical records, and the bank account information for the overseas transfers. "I appreciate you expediting this," Andre said smoothly. "My wife is quite eager to settle the estate and move forward with her life." "Of course," Martinez replied. "Though I have to ask, Mr. Morgan, how exactly does a dead man collect his own life insurance payout?" Andre's confident smile faltered. "I'm sorry, what did you say?" "Andre Morgan, you're under arrest for insurance fraud, identity theft, and conspiracy to commit financial crimes." The hotel room door burst open as federal agents flooded in. Andre's face went through a series of expressions: confusion, disbelief, and finally, rage. But what shocked me most was that even in handcuffs, he wasn't looking around frantically trying to understand how he'd been caught. He was looking directly at the surveillance camera, as if he somehow knew I was watching. "Danielle!" he shouted at the camera. "You pathetic, vindictive woman! You've ruined everything!" Even after everything he'd done to me, after 18 months of planning my destruction, he still thought he was the victim in this situation. The trial took place 6 months later. By then, the full scope of Andre and Lena's operation had been exposed. They weren't just planning one insurance fraud, they were part of a network that had successfully faked deaths and collected payouts for at least 12 other people over the past 3 years. Walter Stevens had provided services for half of them, collecting enormous fees for his participation. I testified on the 3rd day of the trial. Sitting in that witness box, facing Andre across the courtroom, I felt none of the nervousness I'd expected. Instead, I felt powerful, in control, like I was finally telling my own story instead of being a supporting character in his. "Mrs. Morgan," the prosecutor asked, "can you tell the court about your emotional state during your husband's funeral?" "I was devastated," I replied. "Honestly, I loved my husband deeply, and I believed he had died suddenly, leaving me alone after 35 years of marriage. I gave a eulogy celebrating his life and our love. I threw dirt on what I thought was his coffin. I grieved genuinely for a man who was lying 6 feet away from me, very much alive, listening to every word. And how did you feel when you discovered the truth? Betrayed doesn't begin to cover it," I said, looking directly at Andre. This wasn't just about money. Andre had stolen my grief, weaponized my love against me, and planned to let me live the rest of my life thinking I was a widow while he enjoyed our stolen future with another woman. Andre stared back at me with pure hatred, but I felt nothing. The man I'd loved was gone, if he'd ever existed at all. This person in the defendant's chair was a stranger who happened to share his face. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours. Andre was sentenced to 18 years in federal prison. Lena received 12 years. Walter Stevens, who had cooperated with prosecutors, got 5 years and complete financial ruin. The judge, the Honorable Evelyn Brooks, showed no mercy during sentencing. "Mr. Morgan," she said, "you didn't just commit financial crimes. You tortured your wife psychologically, forcing her to grieve your fake death while you plan to steal her future. This court finds your actions particularly cruel and calcinated." 2 years later, I was sitting in my garden on a perfect spring morning when my phone rang. I almost didn't recognize the number, but something made me answer. "Danielle." Andre's voice was rougher now, aged by prison. "I need to talk to you." "We have nothing to discuss, Andre." "I'm getting out in 8 years with good behavior. We need to talk about our future." I laughed, a sound that surprised me with its genuine amusement. "Our future?" "Andre, I divorced you 18 months ago. Our future ended the day you faked your death." "You can't do this to me, Danielle. I'm still your husband." "No," I said firmly. "You're a stranger who stole my husband's identity and destroyed my marriage. But thank you for calling, because you've reminded me how far I've come." I hung up and blocked his number, then walked back to my garden where Caleb was teaching his 8-year-old daughter how to plant tomatoes. My nephew had become the son I'd never had, and his family had become my family in ways that were deeper and more real than the 35 years I'd wasted on Andre. 6 months ago, I'd started a support group for financial fraud victims. 12 women and 3 men met every Thursday in my living room, sharing their stories and rebuilding their lives together. Some had been betrayed by spouses, others by children or business partners, but we all understood the particular pain of having your trust weaponized against you. Last month, I'd also started dating again. Elliot Tran, the insurance investigator who'd helped expose Andre's scheme, had asked me to dinner after the case closed. It was tentative and careful. 2 people who'd learned the hard way that trust had to be earned rather than given freely. But what surprised me most was how much I liked my new life. The woman Andre had called pathetic and boring had discovered she was actually quite strong and resourceful. I'd exposed a criminal network, testified in federal court, and rebuilt my entire existence from scratch. I was 61 years old, and for the first time in decades, I was living for myself instead of supporting someone else's dreams. As I watered my roses that evening, I thought about the phone call from Andre. 8 years from now, when he was released from prison, he'd find a world that had moved on completely without him. I'd be nearly 70, surrounded by people who actually loved me, living a life he'd never be invited to join. Andre had tried to steal my future, but instead he'd given me something far more valuable. He'd freed me to discover who I really was when I wasn't being someone else's wife. And that woman, I'd learned, was absolutely magnificent. Thank you so much for staying until the end. Your support keeps this channel alive. Please like the video, subscribe, and tell me where you're watching from. Until the next story, take care.